Hey Sanjoe, we are live now.
Hey Rajan, great to be here.
How are you? It's been a while. We
Good.
met.
It's been a while. Yes, things have been slow and steady. I think this year has been eventful with, especially on the tech space, right? So, been waiting and watching on how the space is going to recover. But yeah, otherwise all good.
Sanjoe, your volume seems to be a little feeble for me. I don't know if it's the case for the audience. I'll check with them on the chat. Could
Okay.
you check if
I,
your volume is all right?
Let me see. I can hear you
Yeah,
well.
it's
So,
good. Better. Awesome.
is it,
Uh,
is it better?
yes. It is very good.
Okay. Wonderful.
So, welcome, Sanjo. Welcome to this LinkedIn Live. I'm excited to speak to you. A lot of first time founders are joining us to learn a little bit about how to build from an enterprise perspective. Um, and I'd kick off about 10 years ago, there used to be this myth that you cannot build a product company. Definitely, you cannot build an enterprise product company from India.
Yeah.
The only thing that you could do is maybe like there is an IBM or an SAP that will come to India and then sell their global products. But now
Yeah.
we know that that is not true. Definitely, Talview, many other companies like WhatFix, Dhruva, and others have actually built global enterprise products from India and have also sold. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Just for the audience, can you give a quick intro about Talview? What do you do? And also maybe a short version of your origin story. How did you get started?
Definitely. So, Talview is a talent measurement platform which helps enterprise organizations, primarily large enterprises, to manage their talent decision making process. So, this is anywhere from whom to hire, whom to promote, whom to certify. So, all kind of decisions which typically involves talent measurement, which is interviews, assessments, other forms of automated evaluation. That's what Talview focuses on. So we have a what we call Talview orchestration platform. Um, is there an audio issue again, Rajan? No. Rajan, you're frozen. No. Rajan, can you hear me?
Yes, Sanju, I can hear you barely.
Or is it? What about others? Yusuf, can you confirm if you can? Okay. Think, Rajan, there's some background noise coming from your side. Is that why the system is blocking out audio? I don't know. Okay. I'll just I'll just continue assuming that now everything is fine. Rajan, your video is freezing in between, but I'm assuming that's not impacting other users. So that's what Talview does. We are a talent measurement platform which helps large enterprises to make effective talent decisions. We have a bunch of screening and selection tools which we offer in an orchestration platform. So we sit on top of existing recruitment management systems or learning management systems of customers and help them to do these talent measurement transactions in a intelligent, scalable, repeatable manner. So that's what we do. We work with primarily enterprise organizations in high volume hiring industries. So this is IT services, call centers, retail organizations, hospitality, technology. So these are the kind of industries we work with. We are a team of close to 250 people, headquartered in the US. We have a R&D center in Bangalore, where I'm visiting right now, and we have around 150 plus enterprise customers. We've raised three rounds of funding, the last round being Series B, which was done a couple of years back. And has been, I would say, the origin story itself is related to what Rajan, you started off with, where early on we were focused on uh, we were focused we were fo- so we, just before Talview we had co-founded a company called Interview Master, where we were selling to mid-market customers from India globally and also within India. And we had good early traction, but we realized that the space was relatively new and nascent, where the top of the funnel demand, which is required to sell to mid-market customers, was not really there. But we loved the space. We've had a lot of rich insights for the space. So we wanted to build an enterprise company in the space. We knew that based on our early interactions, we knew that there's a strong enterprise demand for this segment, and there are a lot of early adopter customers who are ready to bet on us. So that's essentially how Talview was formed in 2017, based on our past experience. And we were fortunate to sign some big customers early on, which essentially helped the overall enterprise journey. And I can talk more about that as we discuss further.
So, Sanjo, how did the US pivot came about? When did you realize that you need to start selling to the US customers?
Yeah, so from day one, when we set up Talview, and given our history in the space, we were very clear that we want to sell to the US market. That was very clear. So when we incorporated the company, we incorporated that in the US. While we didn't have any physical presence there at that point of time, co-founders were all here. I started traveling to the US almost from day one, and I think we hired our first US salesperson in 2018. So almost from when you look at enterprise space, especially if you are trying to sell in the large enterprise vertical, US is probably the only market where you can build a sizable business. So it was very clear that US is the market to start with or focus on from day one.
So, from an enterprise perspective, what is unique about selling to enterprise? What is different? And what is different in India and what is different in the US?
Yeah, I think the primary aspect of enterprise is decision making is a lot more complex. So the problem statements could be very similar irrespective of the organization size. They might have similar problem statements, but the way they make decisions, they have a more comprehensive framework on how they make decisions. And it is not just about the quality of the solution or the quality of the way in which you're solving the problem for the customer. It's also about is this a sustainable business? Are we compliant with a lot of requirement, whether it's from a privacy, from a security, from a process standpoint? And also, do we have uh, the operational bandwidth to support and manage interactions with the customer of an enterprise scale? So they have a large infrastructure at their end to work with vendors to implement a solution, to do change management internally within the enterprise. Do we have a reciprocatory mechanism or infrastructure which can effectively work with the customer and make it happen for the customer? So I think so the decision making framework is a little more elaborate, and that's what we need to check box with when we try to sell to an enterprise. The primary difference between India and US is, I think, the way they look for solutions. In US, the customers they do not differentiate whether it's mid market or enterprise customer. They always look for solutions for a specific problem, and if you are the best at solving that particular problem, that's all they want. In India, customers have a strong preference to have a lesser number of vendors or having the same vendor solve a range of problems for them. They want to deal with less headache. They expect vendors to be a lot more comprehensive from a solution set standpoint. So you don't just need to do one thing very well. You need to do a range of things very well. So that and I think especially when it comes to enterprise, that also is a pricing issue. How much they are willing to spend. And in an enterprise segment, you don't want to sell deals which are too small, even in India. So you need to have a package which the customer is willing to spend the optimum amount of money. So that also means you need a more comprehensive solution.
So in enterprise, you cannot sell low. You have to make sure that you are selling above a certain threshold. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
there is no way you can the sales cycle, the customer servicing cost, the acquisition cost, the servicing cost is going to be high. So you can't afford to, uh, I would say, sell at a small ticket to enterprise and build a sustainable business. There is expectation in terms of the nature of service, the nature of support, the nature of even the sales experience that you need to meet.
Yeah. So
Whether
in India, what would that be? And US, what would that minimum threshold sound like?
so, so in India, based on our experience, we have seen that we can have a profitable customer if it's above $40,000 in the enterprise segment. In the US, it used to be around 100,000, but now I think with the increased cost and everything, it's more 120 to 150. That's what your average contract value has to be. Annual contract value has to be for you to have a profitable business. Anything below that, you will see that either you will burn a lot of money, or you will lose to competition eventually, because the customer has expectations which you need to fulfill as an enterprise vendor. And the ticket size, if you're not able to meet that, then they will look for other partners.
So Sanjo, when did you find your first US customer? How did you find that?
So our first customer was a US customer with significant presence in APAC or in India.
So it is
So
your Indian customer who took you to the US.
yeah, you can say that. So essentially, uh, we were very conscious that if you're building an enterprise business from a long term standpoint, we want our um, in a strong revenue base to be in the US. So even when we would go and pitch to early on, when we didn't have a lot of access to the US, because none of the founders had any background of working in the US or studying in the US. We were all here in India throughout our life. Uh, so our first port of call was to try and go to customers believe whom we believe that they could take us to other geographies, especially the US. But when we also pitched them, we were also always pitching for a US contract. So we can contract with you in the US, and in most cases that helped because that also meant that these customers had larger budgets at a global level. So we pushed these customers to. We were in a category which was still early stage, so there weren't a lot of global competition. So if the customer is evaluating a solution, we were always able to get an evaluation at a global level or at a multi geography level, which helped us to get early contracts, which when the consumption was largely in India, the contracts were global contracts with an opportunity to expand to other geographies. So that definitely helped. But the other thing I think which also was crucial was the way in which we position as a business. So we were very conscious about how our marketing communication, how every I would say visible aspects of the business was tuned. So some of the first hires we made from US standpoint was in marketing, for example, and then in sales. So that everything which we put out from when we came out of the stealth mode and was actively going after customers, we wanted to ensure that we don't get and these I think these things have changed quite a lot today. Enterprise customers in the US are a lot more comfortable buying from Indian companies, but in those days there was still that question mark on, oh, if your entire team is based in India, how will you support us? There's a lack of comfort with customers while they wouldn't say it out loud. There was always that question mark, which the unasked question kind of thing, which we could sense in conversations.
How did you overcome that initially?
So I think a lot of it early on was, like I said, we were very proactive in ensuring that in every which way we were perceived as a US based company, whether it's starting from the LinkedIn profiles to the website, the language. So we had all our writers were from the US, so the language they used, all of that. And then pretty much, I think the first till the time I relocated to the US in 2019, I was traveling back and forth sometimes up to six times a year, just to ensure that if a large customer wanted to meet me or meet the leadership of the organization, I was always available there, and my sales team did not have to say that, oh, they're not here or they are somewhere else. So we were always available for our customers, our large customers whom we signed early on. So that, I think that it was a lot of hard work early on, but that definitely paid off in terms of we were able to sign up many Fortune 50, 100 customers in the first 3-4 years of operations, with the kind of efforts we put in to ensure that we portray a global brand and global ambition.
So you didn't put that made in love with India. You always said that we are made in global company.
Yeah, I think that's true. And things have changed quite a bit recently. I think now customers are a lot more comfort. So that I think early on, when back in 2010 or prior to that, Indian companies are always looked at good services companies, not good product companies. Then I think 2010 to 2020 or maybe 2018, it was like Indian companies were also good SMB products or mid-market product builders, but not looked at as enterprise. Enterprise is more complex products and more complex sales process and all of that. But I think now, in the last few years, that perception has also changed, where uh, we we have seen a lot of customers. In fact, preferring companies with strong presence in India, because they know that we have a better availability of talent, especially engineering talent. We have cost arbitrage, though it's much lesser than what it used to be. We have cost arbitrage, which will also pass on to them in some form or shape. And then the fact that generally Indian companies have been successful vendors for many of them. They already use other Indian products in the enterprise space, so they've been generally a lot more comfortable.
I mean, it is so glad to hear that, right? So this was a almost like how you said, an unsaid bias against you, and if
Yeah,
that behavior is shifting, then the new enterprise-focused companies that are going to come about, they'll face much lesser headwinds compared to you. So
yeah,
Sanju, you talked about something very interesting. You said like the three founders, you did not have any like US presence, or you did not move to the US. Many folks actually move to the US during their college or graduation time, and then they start building companies. And if you look at companies from 2010, many B2B companies in the Bay Area or like Valley or even like broader US, they'd be started by Indians. And some statistics said 1 out of $2 billion revenue company in US had an Indian co-founder, but then they would set up back office in India. So for them, it was about setting up the engineering center, but for you, it was about setting up your front office, and you did not have that presence or the experience that is there. So for you, where did that mindset come from of saying that you need to be global, and also this lack of this a decade plus of experience uh, till you moved in 2019, how did
yeah.
you deal with it?
I think the choice of starting in the US was primarily driven by the fact that while we have not spent time in the US, our DNA was enterprise. I used to uh, be in organizations which were selling enterprise products. My co-founders were also in the enterprise segment, though in India, in their previous organization. So as an organization, our DNA was enterprise. So we did try building a mid market product just before this, and while we had good success. from a outcome standpoint, the were sure that if we want to build something really big, which will meet our aspirations and ambitions, it has to be in enterprise based space, because that's where the founder market fit exists. We are naturally enterprise kind of thinker. That's the kind of products we wanted to build. That's the kind of go to market we are more familiar with. So we have decided that we want to, and that's the market we chose. Also, it required us to build an enterprise company. It was still a market which was evolving. So the choice of building enterprise was more founder market fit, and I would say product market fit driven. But once that decision was made, then it was about how do we build it. So a few things which we did early on, which did help us quite a lot. So we joined the Microsoft Accelerator at that point of time. The reason we looked at a bunch of different options, and the reason we chose Microsoft Accelerator at that time was because Microsoft, as a part of their program, was like offering a lot of global exposure. So we went through the accelerator, and during the accelerator process itself, we got a lot of access to global customer connections and things like that. But we also got selected to a global roadshow. In fact, Prasanna, who's part of Upeka, used to be the CTO of Microsoft Accelerator at that point of time. So we got selected as a part of a global roadshow out of all the startups across all the locations of Microsoft Accelerator. I think there was 15 companies at that point of time, from 600 odd companies or so. And that roadshow actually led to many of our first customers. So we had some big US retailers becoming customers out of that. We built some strong relationship, go-to-market relationship with Microsoft in that process in the US, which helped us in getting in front of more customers and acquiring more customers. That definitely helped. The other thing which helped us was we were very conscious that we would only raise fund. We are not in the US, but at least our investors have to be in the US. They should know the US market better. So we never tried to raise funding in India at that point of time. We started a fundraise process in the US, and
I want to come to that a little bit, but before
yeah,
that, on your Microsoft Axel, I still remember that you took a photo along with Satya, right, during that
yeah,
roadshow, and maybe there were only two companies, but of all the accelerators, I mean, all the Israel, India, and China accelerator had gone, but only you took a photo
yeah.
posing next to a book that was released or something like that, right?
Yeah, never let go of an opportunity. But that photo also helped quite a lot. So I think every Microsoft GTM meeting will start with that photo. So then that would help us to get a lot more attention from the
Attention and alignment from the channel
Microsoft
partnership, go-to-market
channel
team.
partnership team. And in fact, Microsoft channel partnership was one of the key ingredients of our success early on. But yeah, so that helped quite a lot. Then
Sure. On this part that you said about you were very conscious about not wanting to fundraise locally, but also only from a. Just double click on that. Why is that? It almost seems like there is a bias against the Indian investors.
not really. I think the so like you said, we didn't have any understanding of the US market beyond I would say visits which we have done to the US, and we wanted to ensure that anything else which in the ecosystem or in the stakeholder ecosystem of the organization where we could get US access, we have that. And this was also a time where there was a lot of focus on US India cross border investments and things like that. And so we've were very consciously decided that, okay, let's get a US based investor, seed investor at that time. That will give us access to the subsequent rounds of funding also in the US from a US industry standpoint, but also access to hiring go-to-market teams in the US. They could also get us some initial customer introductions, and also having a US investor will also help with customer impressions as well. Okay, while the team probably is operating out of India. The investors are here in the US, and investors are key stakeholders in the organization. So that's an additional layer of comfort from that standpoint as well. And I think and thanks to you, I think we raised our seed investment based on an intro which you made. So we had our first investor from the US at that point of time, and then from there onwards, I think it was a lot more easier to continue that journey of continuing to raise from US investors round after round.
So, folks that are tuning in, if you have questions, please put it on comments. I'll pick it up one by one. Sanjoe, when we met in 2016, at that time we were making the visits to the US, and then later in 2019, like you said, you moved. What are some of the lessons from the move? You knew that you wanted to build an enterprise business, and you knew that you wanted to have enterprise customers, like also to leverage more of that. You wanted to have enterprise investors, but it was much late in the journey of the company that you decided to move. So in like now you have been in the US for like 3+ years, right? So given what you know, when should a CEO founder move to the US? Was it the right? Is it still the right time, or it should move early, or should it move a little late? And I'm especially asking from an enterprise perspective, right? Because from a SaaS experience of India ecosystem point of view, there are founders that have moved pre-product market fit, and there are founders who have just moved pre-IPO, and there is a whole spectrum in between. So enterprise, your thoughts?
I think the key is if you could do it, I would say move as soon as you are founding the company, because the way in which if you're building for the global enterprise market, you want at least one co-founder, and preferably the person who is shaping the product and and to some extent later on with a go-to-market playbook to have a global outlook from day one. And that will only come with spending significant time in the market. So from that standpoint, I think at least one person has to be in the US market, or if your segment allows you to be in some other market, let's say UK or any other market where you can still build an enterprise company out of. If I think that there are segments where that is possible, then essentially you need to be in those markets. Otherwise, what could happen is you will always end up having a lot of interactions with customers who are in the region where you are. And for example, we spoke about the difference between Indian enterprise customers and US enterprise customers. A lot of those aspects will start influencing your product early on, and it's a difficult calibration later on to do, which I think at Talview also we had to deal with, and we are probably still dealing with respect to, we probably have a broader portfolio than what what I would consider ideal today from the stage of business we are in, because we also had significant exposure to the Indian market in early days. So yeah.
Correct. So as early as possible is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Especially if you're enterprise, because you want to be significantly closer to the customer, understand the domain a lot more deeply.
Yeah.
What are the other difference from like an India and a US perspective? I want to touch a little bit about the hiring. You initially had the entire team that was based out of India, even though you had copywriters or marketing folks that were from US. When you had to do your local hiring, like how was that experience? How is it different in India versus like hiring global employees?
I think in general, hiring has not been a big challenge for us.
As an HR tech company, you should have not a challenge.
Yeah, but I think even otherwise, we have early on we've hired through the network, through the investor network or through personal network, and that definitely helped. We didn't have to justify like that we are a company with very little presence for some of our early employees to come on board. I don't think we ever had to justify that. We also have had good success. I think beyond the first couple of hires, maybe we started using recruitment staffing firms or consultants. And even there, when we these candidates were not from our network, I think hiring was not never a major challenge. Um, I think the only area where it would definitely help is, I think if you have your first few hires, let's say you're trying to build a go-to-market function in the US, and you want to build a sales enterprise sales team in the US. If your first hire is somebody who has the ability to attract more talent, let's say you're hiring a director of sales or director of marketing, if that person can bring the early talent, that definitely helps from building a culture standpoint, trying compared to you directly hiring a lot of different people, because then there is overhead of creating that initial culture all over again. But apart from that, I think we never had any major challenges in terms of hiring.
Culturally, is there any difference in terms of how you have to hire people in India versus US?
I think from a hiring standpoint, yes, obviously there are. I think the big thing to learn was what questions you are not supposed to ask.
Not
Uh,
supposed to ask.
yeah, so I
What
think
would be an example of not supposed to ask questions?
so, for example, you're not supposed to ask about anybody's personal life at all, like family plans or whatever that is, whether they are married or whatever that is. I think no personal questions strictly, no discussions specifics about their current salary or any of that. You can only ask about their expectations. So like that, and you can. I think there are a lot of guidelines available. If you search for it, you'll easily find it online. But there are a lot of things which we are very used to, especially salary and things like that. We are very used to asking in India, which is a strict no go in the US, and then the other aspects also around location and things like that. There are a lot of nuances which you need to be aware of. But apart from that, I think the key is generally the US candidates will be a lot more prepared, better prepared from an interview standpoint. They would do their research. They would connect with you ahead of time on social media. They come prepared. I think in
They'll
India,
visit your website and then
yeah,
know what your offering is.
yeah. So they've in India we rarely find that. I think it's still, and probably it's a nature of the supply demand supply also, where in India there are still a lot more opportunities, so the candidates can afford to be a little more lax in how they prepare for the interview process. But other than that, I think it's pretty much the same. It's more cultural differences in the way the individuals work, which is where I think we have a lot more differences. In India, we are a lot more scrappy. We can deal with chaos very well. We are used to dealing with chaos. I think in the US, or in most Western markets, that's a big issue. Everything needs to be structured and streamlined, and you can't. I think that part of the cultural difference is what we struggle with, especially when it requires a lot of cross geography collaboration. How to ensure that the both sides get what they want, and at the same time, it's not becoming a drain on the organization from a process standpoint.
So there is one question that has come up. What is the right entry strategy for small companies in US market, especially when you don't have a network?
I think there are multiple avenues. So one is like an accelerator. You could always apply to, if you're an early stage company. You could apply to. There are many good accelerators in the US right now, or other markets as well. So that's always, I think it's a good investment to go through that. Second is finding good investors. There are a lot of US India cross border investors right now who are investing in enterprise startups from India. So finding investors from and using them as a launch pad. We used to work out of our investors office for quite some time. We still use their office whenever we need a bigger space, to hiring, to initial customer introduction, all of that. The third thing, which uh, many other companies I know have successfully leveraged, is getting some customers in India, and which we have also done, and then expanding to their global locations from India. So it's much easier than directly selling to their global locations from day one. That also helps. I think those are some of the key
Good
aspects.
ones.
Yeah, good ones.
So there is another comment which is asking that what are the most important factors that influence decision making of an enterprise customer? What would be the number one, two, three?
Yeah. So functional requirement is still number one. You need to meet their functional requirement. Most enterprise customers will have many of them do RFPs, but even if they are not doing RFPs, they will have a functional checklist which you need to answer. So they would have done their research. They have, especially in the Western world, most of these customers use resources like Gartner or some of the other research services to understand requirements of what features they should look for in each product category. So they will have, and then they also rely on their peers and other vendors. Sometimes they do RFIs where they collect all this information, feature lists from different vendors, and then they collate the requirement. Second is from a compliance standpoint. When I say compliance, it's everything from privacy, security,
SOC 2.
SOC 2, ISO, CCPA, or GDPR, all of that. I think that's a must in most Western enterprises now, and even in India today. I think that's a crucial ask. So that is still critical. Third is, I think, demonstrated capability in whatever form or shape, where you can demonstrate the case, whether it's case studies or uh, similar customers or other demonstrated capability. I think you can be creative here. That's what you need to do in early days on how do you demonstrate capability. Where you, but you need to demonstrate that okay, you've especially in general in terms of risk appetite. I would say Western customers have lesser risk appetite compared to Indian customers. Indian customers
That's
are
very
more
surprising.
yeah, are more price conscious, and if you give a
Discount,
lower
they'll make.
price
Yeah.
discount it steeply, you can probably buy your way into
Or
an
they'll
enterprise.
take more risks.
Take more risk linked to price, obviously. But in US, price is or most of Western market, I think price is only after you check boxes with other three aspects. They they rarely take risk only based on price unless they have a significant budget constraint at their end, and not because you're offering a cheaper product when they have budget.
So one comment that has come up is that why is that there are so many successful startups from India that have come in HR tech? And you've also heard me say this before, like, why are there so many HR tech startups from India and doing well globally?
I think it's not just HR tech, but I think HR tech is something which people can easily associate with, and everybody can kind of understand what an HR tech startup does. But I think there are quite a few companies across spaces. IT is, I think, or DevOps is an IT DevOps dev tools. I think there are probably even more number of startups from India. But I think it's a part of it is the uh, the HR as a process in most organizations is, I would say, more forward-looking in terms of their adoption. It's a talent is probably one of the most competitive areas from an industry standpoint, and companies are always on the lookout for better tools, better ways to do things so that they can stay competitive in the talent market. So generally, there is a lot more experimentation, a lot more innovation which is happening in the especially in the hiring space compared to broader HR tech. I think in the hiring space there's a lot more innovation happening. Second, I believe is also hiring is one area where enterprises still buy in pockets. They don't have to necessarily buy enterprise-wide tools always, which helps you to sell to one geography or one business unit and then grow within an organization, which is probably not possible if you're building an ERP or many of the other
broad
enterprise
term.
broad category tools.
Right. So this is a message that's not on the comments, but come from the internal messaging system. Um, like within the community, there is this discussion saying that you cannot export product market fit. Just because you had product market fit in India doesn't mean you will
Yeah.
have product market fit in the US. Your comments on that?
So I think yes, it's 100% agree with that. I already spoke about one major difference, which is the customer expectations. Many times your product might be too complex if you have spent enough time in Indian market before you go to a Western market. Customers expect much more simpler product. There is also an aspect of Indian customers are not very self-service friendly. They expect a lot of service to be bundled with
Do
for
it for
free.
me. Yeah, do
Do
it
it
for
for,
me.
do it for me, then self do it yourself. So I think that you oftentimes the way you trade off between broader set feature set is by making a lot of things administrator heavy, or do it for me compared to do it yourself. I think those things definitely are different. Beyond that, I think at a broad category level, I wouldn't think there are a ton of differences. I think it's more user behavior differences, which makes product market fit not exportable. But I think while it's not exportable, you can calibrate and get there. It's not difficult, but you need to be very conscious about it, and you need to uh, have very clear strategy that this is what you want to get to, and these are the sacrifices which you have to make for that.
Yeah, Prasanna calls that the Indian customers want a thali and the American customers want a grilled fish. Right? Just one
Yeah,
dish, and they
yeah,
want an entire plethora of dish, in a one single large plate. Um, Sanjo, we are going to wrap up. Just one more question, the
hmm,
wrapping up question. So, given your experience, given what you know now, what are one, two, maybe three things that you would like to share with first-time founders in terms of avoiding mistakes to make for
yeah,
going global, especially when you're thinking about it from an enterprise perspective? Like, if you were starting up again, what would you do
yeah.
differently based on what you know?
So one thing which I already spoke about, probably I would have relocated to the US a little more earlier. We were um, we were thinking that we were doing well, so we didn't really have a need to be there. We were still acquiring customers, but we were also acquiring customers in India in parallel because we were also here. I think that dual market strategy was probably not staying focused on in early days on one single market is crucial, especially when you're trying to build for the global market. Second is, I think, from a hiring standpoint, everybody preaches hire and fire fast, but I think hiring slow is and firing fast is probably a better approach. I believe personally we've made a lot of hiring mistakes, especially in India. It's a lot more easier. You understand the culture, you can read people much better. But I think when you're hiring in a global market early on with no experience of that culture, I think everybody in US would, for example, look like great sales guys because generally they are more assertive in communication, while in India that's not the case. So but that does not necessarily make them good salespeople, for example. So I think those are nuances which you need to understand and appreciate when you're making decisions. So I think that's probably one thing which I would change. And then lastly, I think the entire um, uh, compliance and all of those aspects, I wouldn't. I think they are important. You need to invest in them, and I wouldn't take shortcuts because
Especially the cross-border compliance, right?
yeah, the cross-border compliance, a lot of accounting, this, that, all of that. I think especially when you have you have lawyers who will, you obviously at early stage you cannot have multiple lawyers. You cannot have lawyers in the US and India and maybe in other geographies and all that. So you end up taking advice which is probably more one-sided often. So but things are very different in these geographies, especially if you compare US and India. So you end up having to do a lot of rework later on, which is painful to go through, especially when you want to close a funding round or any such major events happening in the company. It just becomes a significant drain, which takes the joy away from some of those milestones. I think that trying to find right advisors, whether it's legal, whether it's privacy, whether it's other aspects of business, who understand both markets, who have gone through that journey, is very crucial.
Awesome. Sanjoe, thank you so much. A very rich and insightful discussion. Thank you for taking the time and coming on this LinkedIn Live.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for inviting me, and thanks for everything you and Upeka are doing for the ecosystem.
Thanks, Sanjoe.
Thank you.